Congratulations. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Haute-Gaspésie-Ladmétis Matin Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, I was astonished by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report on residential schools. This dark episode of our history during which entire cohorts of young Aboriginals were uprooted from their families and their communities is a gaping wound in the relationship that we have with Aboriginal peoples. Now that the final report has finally spoken the reality, which is that it was a cultural genocide, we have the duty to fundamentally change our relationship with Aboriginal peoples and to contribute to healing this wound. Let us put an end to the paternalistic attitude of the federal government, put an end to the condescendence they show towards First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Let us get rid of the Indian Act, which is an archaic piece of legislation that upholds a regime that others used as an inspiration for apartheid. Let's give Aboriginal peoples the tools they need to keep their languages and cultures living and so that they can ensure their economic, social, environmental development of their communities. It's the least we can do.
Member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to be part of a Conservative government that is doing so much for Canadian women. We've gotten tough on violent sexual offenders while supporting victims' rights. We've taken on those who traffic in girls. We've targeted prostitution laws at the men who exploit women while offering their victims an exit from exploitation. I've worked with Women's Enterprise Skills Training of Windsor to secure funding for an action plan devised by young women to overcome barriers to women in the skilled trades. I've secured funding to bring women and local banks together to ensure women have specialized services for their financial preparedness, and secured funding for a program targeting the advancement of women to the highest levels at major local employers. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to support our budget with its action plan to help women access capital and mentorship to create jobs. As a husband to a strong woman, a father to 4 young, strong women and girls, and as MP for Essex, it's Conservatives who are standing up for Canadian women.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity today to highlight an important date for the environment. On June 5th, people from around the entire world will celebrate World Environment Day and Clean Air Day. Unfortunately, the environmental issue is regularly forgotten by the Conservative government. And yet, a recent study by the Uranos Consortium tells us that a lack of action on climate change could cost us billions in health care. Speaking of education, I would like to congratulate the Regional Council on the Environment, Bloc Vert, and GARAP, which is the Research and Wildlife Conservation Support Group at Jean Rébeau School. They're doing a superb job on the environment. Finally, on October 19th, the NDP under Thomas Mulcair will make Canada an environmental leader on the world stage. Happy Environment and Clean Air Day to all.
Langley.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to pay special tribute to Langley's own retired Royal Canadian Air Force Colonel George Miller upon his induction into Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. George joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1953 at the age of 18, became a top Canadian fighter pilot. He was the base commander of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, was the team leader of the Canadian Snowbirds aerial demonstration team, and is currently the team leader of the Fraser Blues formation team, which is renowned for its Remembrance Day flyovers. In 1990, George became the manager of the struggling Langley Regional Airport. With vision, hard work, and commitment, he's transformed the airport in Langley into an outstanding community asset and one of Canada's top community airports with multi-million-dollar businesses that are renowned for helicopter operations. George has been a huge contributor to many successful community events over the years, including Canada Day celebrations and the Sky's No Limit Girls Fly Too, an event designed to instill young girls with the passion of flight and a career in aviation. Congratulations, George Miller.
The Honourable Member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the presence in the gallery of Joanne Yvonne Pendergast, a lovely American lady celebrating her 80th birthday with Canadian husband Michael. Having experienced the splendors of Western Canada as they traveled on the Rocky Mountaineer, they are joined by Michael's niece and her husband Anne and Herman Wallner. It turns out, Mr. Speaker, that Michael and Anne have a link to Parliament Hill. As a young girl of 20, Mary Evelyn Thompson, who was Michael's mother and Anne's grandmother, was a personal secretary on Parliament Hill. She was here the night that Centre Block, save for the Library of Parliament, burned in 1916. They both recall with considerable fondness the stories that she told about that fire and other exciting happenings on the Hill. Please join me in wishing a happy birthday to Joanne and in recognizing the Canadian family with the Hill connections that she has with her here today.
The Honourable Member for Stormont, Dundas and South Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, a recent survey found 1 in 8 Ontario youth reported using a prescription drug for non-medical purposes, and approximately 70% said they obtained the drug from home. I want to thank our local law enforcement and pharmacies across the country who are working together to combat those types of troubling statistics and to make a difference. Through a partnership with the Cornwall Community Police Service and the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, several Medi-Drop boxes have been placed throughout the city of Cornwall. Great idea. Medi-Drop is a program that offers a safe place for the public to dispose of unused, unwanted, or expired medication. To date, they have safely disposed of 1,461 pounds of prescription medication. I want to thank originator Danielle Lozo of the Cornwall Police and all those involved, not just locally, but across the country, for encouraging people to clean out their medicine cabinets. Mr. Speaker, let's continue to raise awareness about this simple task can save and protect the health of so many. Thank you.
Member for Saint Albert. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to use my last statement in this Parliament to take the time to thank all of the residents of my riding, the volunteers and organizations I've been working with for the last 4 years. All of these people have the courage to believe that we can change the world and have the generosity to get involved to achieve that. I thank the organizations that work hard in my riding to improve the lives of others. On Sunday, I was able to see the remarkable devotion of members of the Alzheimer's Society of the South Shore. I'm also thinking of the volunteers who get involved every day in my riding office. Janine, Diane, Béchir, Louise, Christina, José, and all of the others who offer their time and energy to go out and meet with constituents. They give endlessly to convince that politics, when exercised with passion and altruism, can change the lives of people. I'm very proud to have worked with them over the course of the last 4 years. My friends, let us love each other, get involved, keep our hopes up, and we can change the world.
Member for Leeds, Grenville.
Mr. Speaker, His Worship Dr. John Andrew Balkwell passed away peacefully on May 14th, 2015. He leaves behind his loving wife, Janet, and daughters, Anne and Christy. John enjoyed a varied and esteemed career. John practiced dentistry in Canada for 28 years. He is a former National Vice President of the Conservative Party of Canada and former President of the Canada Carleton Rotary Club. For many years, John served as a member of the Board of Directors of the Canada Ports Corporation and as such further served as Chairman of the Police Committee of Ports Canada Police. John then served for several years as the Vice Chair of the Ontario Civilian Commission on Police Services, and from 2003 until the time of his passing, served as Justice of the Peace with the Ontario Court of Justice. John was a good friend to me, and as well a mentor to me and to many others, and he will be dearly missed.
Honourable Member for Mississauga, East Crookston.
Mr. Speaker, I am very proud to rise in this House to recognize a very special person in my life, my wife Gosha. 37 years ago today, we both said yes and became husband and wife. Ever since, I've been blessed with her unconditional love and support. When I decided to enter public life, she became my great mentor and supporter. Gosha, I thank you for our 2 wonderful children we raised, our son Marcin and daughter Kinga. You are the best wife, mother, and now grandmother of our amazing grandchildren, Benjamin, Jan, and Alexandra. And Gosha, this is a little poem for you. I don't know what it is you saw in me. What I saw in you was the utmost happiness that can ever be. Even more so on the day when you and I became we. I can still smile and say with love and truth, honey, I love you. Happy anniversary. Hey!
The honourable member may be raising the bar for the rest of us. The honourable member for Acadie Bathurst.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with a great deal of emotion that I rise today. Over 18 years in the House of Commons, I've had the honour of representing the people of Acadie Bathurst and defending the interests of Canadians from coast to coast. It's not easy to leave this house. This place has allowed me to experience many beautiful moments and a lot of emotions. But, as I said, there's a time to begin and there's a time to leave. I want to thank my children, Céline, Nadine, and Stéphanie, as well as my wife, Lina, and her children, Cindy, Christian, and Valérie, who have supported me in 1997 when I decided to run for the first time. Thanks to my employees, Françoise, Roxane, Chantal, Nadine, Sonia, and all of those who preceded them. I also want to thank all of the House of Commons staff who work in the shadows, the security services, the interpreters who for 18 years have managed to translate and interpret my heated debates in the House, and also the maintenance staff as well as all of the other services. Thanks as well to the NDP, my colleagues, for having welcomed me into their large political family, and thank you to the people of Acadie Bathurst for having put their trust in me. I love you all.
Honourable member for Peace River.
Mr. Speaker, this Friday, family and friends will gather to celebrate the life of Michael Dyka following his sudden passing last month. Mike was born and raised in the farming community of Rycroft, Alberta, a community in which he was proud to raise his family, a community that he spent his life helping build. Mike's commitment to public service started in his youth when in April of 1941 until December of 1946, Mike served our country in World War II as a private in the Royal Canadian Ordnance Corps, the Royal Canadian Electrical Mechanical Engineers, the 1st Light Anti-Aircraft Regiment, and finally in the 3rd Division Occupation Force. Mike served across Europe during his military service. Upon his return, his love for farming, his incredible imagination and creativity, his skills and the discipline, as well as the strong work ethic that he brought from his childhood as well as from his military service, it yielded a passion for inventing farm equipment that transformed the industry in the Peace Country and throughout the prairies. Mike was a man who loved his family, loved his community, and loved his country. We thank him for his contribution. We thank him for his service.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, in the words of Rosemary Brown, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. While women represent just over 50% of the Canadian population, we occupy just 25% of the seats in this House. I'm proud that the NDP makes equity a priority. We know that informed, engaged, and active women can be successful in effecting real change. We saw it this week in the abolition of the federal sales tax on feminine hygiene products. Without the female MPs on all sides of this House who understood the experiences of Canadian women and an amazing constituent community, I believe this victory would not have been possible. But our work is not yet done. As the satiric online journal The Beaverton points out, this victory leaves 3,424 areas of gender inequality remaining in Canada. I look forward to the 42nd Parliament, where we have the opportunity to elect more women to represent this country's vast and magnificent diversity. Mr. Speaker, just watch what we can do then.
The honourable member for Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Auto companies are one of the many job creators that are starting to push back against the irresponsible ideas of the Liberals in Ontario and the Liberals on the other side of this House. The mandatory expansion of the Canada Pension Plan would kill jobs and dramatically hike taxes on all hard-working Canadians. Absolutely. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Liberal Party is suggesting that an income earner who earns just $60,000 a year should have to pay $1,000 extra a year instead of spending it on their priorities. Mr. Speaker, job creators are pushing back. We reject this plan, and Canadians will never accept it. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we do not raise taxes on the middle class. We cut them.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government is like fish out of water when it comes to the Canada pension plan. Do not trust this Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. He would like to see this plan killed. Today they talked about the voluntary contribution, but in 2010, their finance minister said that the federal government ruled out voluntary contributions to the CPP. They said it wasn't a good idea back then. The Conservatives also claim they're going to consult with the provinces, but their record on consulting is even worse, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has not held a First Ministers' Conference since 2009. The truth is, the Conservative government isn't serious about pension reform. It was nowhere to be found in their unfair budget. The Prime Minister has done nothing but criticize any and all attempts to improve the CPP. Canadians want to be able to retire with the security and dignity that they deserve. A Liberal government would lower the age of OAS back to 65 and would work with the provinces to find ways to improve retirement for all Canadians.
The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberal leader's solution for the middle class, a dramatic tax hike.
You betcha.
He was clear when he said the Liberal Party is looking at a mandatory tax increase to the Canada Pension Plan, like the increase proposed by Kathleen Wynne in Ontario. We know that someone earning $60,000 a year will be paying $1,000 more in taxes. Mr. Speaker, the good people of Newmarket Aurora don't want to pay more taxes. They want more of their money in their own pockets. They want to choose how they save for their retirement through increases to the tax-free savings account. We respect that choice. Mr. Speaker, Canadians simply cannot afford the Liberal plan.
Cannot afford. The honourable member for Algoma, Manitoulin, and Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, it's important for us to acknowledge that we are on unceded Algonquin territory. Yesterday, on this territory, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued its final report. The
testimony was clear. We have to put an end to inaction by previous governments in order to move towards reconciliation and hearing. Too many Aboriginal children are still suffering today from chronic underfinancing of education, a lack of access to quality health care, to drinkable water and housing. In 2015, it is high time to put an end to the cycle of poverty, and we must do it from this moment on. And that is what an NDP government will do. We will not forget the testimony of the thousands of survivors. We will not forget the over 6,000 children who never came home.
The Commissioners, collective efforts from all peoples are necessary to revitalize the relationship between Aboriginal peoples and Canadian society. Reconciliation is the goal.
Yes. The honourable member for Don Valley West.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the NDP lifted the veil on its anti-Israel agenda. The member for Ottawa Centre questioned why our government would stand against policies that would only serve to isolate Israel. We remain committed to upholding and strengthening the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. However, like the U.S. and the UK, we could not support consensus at the conference. We will never support any policy whose sole purpose is the isolation or the embarrassment of our greatest ally in the region. The question yesterday from the member for Ottawa Centre is hardly surprising, Mr. Speaker, given the long anti-Israel history of the NDP. Let's not forget it was the member for Vancouver East who said that Israel represents, and I quote, the longest occupation in the world. Unlike the NDP, this Conservative government not only recognizes Israel's right to exist, but its inherent right to defend itself by itself.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member for Halifax.
Yesterday, we heard a clear message from survivors and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Reconciliation is more than just words, it's also meaningful action. But the Prime Minister again has refused to take action on key recommendations, like implementing the recommendation to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to seize this opportunity to move towards reconciliation? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, we thank the TRC for their work, and we thank the former residential school students for the courage and strength they showed in sharing their stories with Canadians. Canada is one of the only countries in the world where Aboriginal and treaty rights are entrenched in our Constitution. We have endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as an aspirational document and a significant step forward in improving our relationship with Aboriginal peoples, and we will continue to take concrete measures to improve the living conditions of Aboriginal peoples.
The honourable member for Halifax.
It's too bad this government lacks the courage and strength to act.
Here,
They
here.
said no to an inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women. They passed legislation affecting Aboriginal rights without any consultation. They voted against implementing the UN Declaration. They underfunded First Nations education and social services, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars fighting Aboriginal and treaty rights.
Shame.
As Justice Marie Sinclair has said, words are not enough. So will the Prime Minister commit to real change and real reconciliation?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, it was our government that signed the Residential Schools Agreement, made the apology to, on behalf of all Canadians, and created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. It was this Prime Minister who made the historic apology to former students of Indian residential schools, their families and their communities. And our government has implemented many initiatives to improve the lives of First Nations living in this country, and our government will keep working with Aboriginal communities and individuals to improve their lives. And, Mr. Speaker, we would like the opposition to actually get on board and support those concrete measures that we've taken to improve the lives of Aboriginal people.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Not just about what happened in the past, it's about what's still happening today.
Hear, hear.
20 years after the last residential school closed, the state of First Nations education in Canada is a disgrace. There are too many First Nations children who don't have a safe, quality school to attend in their local community, and First Nations students still receive an average of $8,000 less than students in the rest of Canada. Will the government act now to close the gap before another generation suffers from these discriminatory education policies?
Here, here.
Mr. Speaker, our government remains committed to a fair and lasting resolution to the legacy of Indian residential schools. As acknowledged by the Prime Minister's historic apology on behalf of all Canadians in 2008, there's no place in Canada for the attitudes that inspired Indian residential schools to ever prevail again. We continue to make significant investments in Aboriginal education. Our recent budget committed substantial funding for education on reserve and builds upon an investment of $500 million that was announced last year by the Prime Minister for First Nations education infrastructure. We will continue to work with First Nations, parents, teachers, schools and leaders to improve the quality of First Nations education on reserve.
Honourable member for Burnaby, New Westminster.
Mr. Speaker, more words are not needed. Action is needed. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was clear. In order to achieve reconciliation, we need a new relationship based on mutual respect, a nation-to-nation relationship. But despite the many moving stories Canadians heard yesterday, the Prime Minister is still insisting that he will not implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In the spirit of reconciliation, I ask the Conservatives again, will they listen to the Commission and implement the UN Declaration?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, Canada is one of the only countries in the world where Aboriginal and treaty rights are recognized in our Constitution. We have endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And, Mr. Speaker, we've also done more than that. We've extended the rights on reserve to women living on reserve. We've given them the same rights as women living off reserve. We've brought the Canadian Human Rights Act to bear on reserve. When we do that, Mr. Speaker, the opposition always votes against it.
The honourable member for Burnaby, New Westminster.
Reconciliation is more than just words. It's also meaningful action. We need to start fresh, nation to nation, with a new approach. And that means implementing the principles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But the Prime Minister is stuck in his ideology. Why is he refusing to protect the fundamental rights of Aboriginal peoples? Why? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Do speak louder than words, and every time that we take action to improve the lives of First Nations people, they vote against it, Mr. Speaker. We've brought in matrimonial property rights for women living on reserve. We've brought in water and wastewater standards like all other Canadians expect for Canadians living on reserve. We've brought in the Canadian Human Rights Act to protect people living on reserve. Mr. Speaker, they always vote against Aboriginal Canadians whenever they're presented with the chance here in the House.
The Honourable Member for Beausejour. Mr. Speaker, the Commission's report, the report by the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation shows just how much work we had in front of us in order to deal with the injuries suffered by First Nations, Métis and Inuit. The government appointed Justice Sinclair, who issued 94 recommendations to put an end and close this sad chapter in our history, which was referred to as a cultural genocide. The Liberal Party immediately accepted the 94 recommendations. Will the government do the same? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, and of course we do thank the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Commissioners for their work, and salute the former residential school students who shared their stories with Canadians. We appreciate that being documented for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we will take the time to consider the recommendations in the light of the full report, which will be released at the end of this year, so that we can carefully consider those. Unlike the Liberal Party, we believe that we need to take a close look at those recommendations and consider them in light of the full report.
The Honourable Member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, the Chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Justice Sinclair, says the abhorrent system of residential schools was an exercise in cultural genocide. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada agrees, as do previous Prime Ministers and Canadians more generally. But judging by comments made by Judge Sinclair yesterday after his meeting with the Prime Minister, this government is not yet on the same page. Will the government explicitly acknowledge the cultural genocide that has taken place, and will it agree with the TRC's recommendations?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister made the historic apology on behalf of all Canadians in 2008, the government recognized that the Indian residential schools caused great harms to individuals, to communities, and to an entire society, and that the attitudes that gave way to that policy had no place in Canada. While we cannot undo the past, we can learn from it, and we've taken the steps necessary to bring closure to the legacy of Indian residential schools. We will continue to promote reconciliation between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians, and we will consider the recommendations of the report in the context of the full report, which will be released later this year.
Honourable Member for Westmount Ville-Marie. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Minister of State for Small Business maintained that during the Trans-Pacific negotiations, Canada would promote supply management. The same day, his colleague, the member for Edmonton Centre, stated that supply management was an anachronism that must disappear. And the Prime Minister's Quebec lieutenant talked about compensating Canadian producers who might be penalized as part of the negotiations for the TPC. So here's the question. Will the government really commit to protecting supply management, yes or no? The Honourable Minister. Reply inaudible. Mr. Speaker, the report of the Commission tabled yesterday was clear. A public inquiry on missing and murdered women is a step towards reconciliation, but once again, the Minister is refusing to show respect and sensitivity. Now is not the time to sit back and do nothing. It's time to show leadership and set up the inquiry. Why is the Minister still refusing to listen to victims?
We don't need another study on top of the 40 that we already have, and it is this government that continues to stand up for victims of violence. Since coming to office, we have toughened sentences for murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, and imposed mandatory prison sentences for most of our crimes, and that member and that party votes against everything we do. We also passed the historic legislation that gave Aboriginal women on reserves the same matrimonial rights that they have, including emergency protection orders, and again, they vote against everything we do to help Aboriginal women and girls.
The minister didn't stand up, he stayed in his seat. Shame on them. During Justice Sinclair's address, the room erupted with cheers when he called called for a national inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women. Yet the minister pointedly stayed in his seat. Mr. Speaker, there are now more than 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada. Without justice for these women and their families, there can be no reconciliation. Will the minister do the right thing and commit to immediately launching a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women?
Government that brought in the action plan to address family violence and violent crimes against Aboriginal women and girls, as well as the Family Violence Prevention Program, and again, they voted against it. Since coming to office, we passed more than 30 criminal justice and public safety initiatives, including tougher sentences for murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, and mandatory prison, and they continue to vote against every single thing we do to help women and girls in Canada.
The honourable member for Welland.
Speaker, yesterday, Minister of State for Agriculture claimed that he would defend supply management. But at committee, the honourable member for Edmonton Centre said, and I quote, "Supply management needs to disappear." It seems some members of the Conservative caucus have actually been telling the truth lately. And farmers no longer really trust this government when it comes to supply management. So, simple question to the minister. Will he denounce the member from Edmonton Centre, or have the Conservatives truly given up on egg farmers, poultry farmers, and dairy farmers across this country?
Our government will continue to promote Canada's trade interests across all sectors of our economy, across every region of our country, including supply management. And that has never prevented us from successfully completing trade agreements with countries like the United States, the European Union, South Korea. We make no apologies for ensuring that any deal reached must be in Canada's best interests. As always, we'll only sign a trade agreement that is in the best interests of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Yesterday, another Conservative voice contributed to unease among farmers over protection for supply management. At committee, the member for Edmonton Centre said supply management needed to disappear. The negotiations are taking place behind closed doors, and farmers are in the dark. 3,500 farms in Quebec alone would be threatened. This industry is worth $3.2 billion a year. Have the Conservative decided to sacrifice supply management? Yes or no? The Honourable Minister. I answered that question earlier in a question to the member for the Liberal Party. I said we will continue to defend supply management. I said yes. And to this question, I will reply no, because they are asking, in this case, if we're going to dismantle it. So the answer to this question is no. We are going to continue to support and promote supply management. The Honourable Member. The Minister responsible for Quebec said that concessions would have to be made for the TPC to work. The Minister of State is playing on words, talking about promoting supply management without saying that they will guarantee it will be maintained. And the Prime Minister is saying that Canada would have to make difficult choices. Farmers deserve honesty. This is a simple question. Yes or no? Will the Conservatives maintain supply management as part of the TPC? The Honourable Minister.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to preserve supply management. Thank you. Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Clearly, the Minister of Finance has his head in the sand. Our economy contracted by 0.6% at the start of the year, but the minister still rejected any concerns that Canada might be headed towards a recession. This morning, the OECD downgraded its forecasts for economic growth in Canada. When will the minister take his head out of the sand and admit that the economy is flagging? The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, it became clear during the meeting of the G7 last week that the global economy remains fragile. The U.S. experienced a difficult first quarter. Growth in China has contracted, and Europe continues to experience difficulties. However, the Bank of Canada, the IMF, and private sector economists predict for Canada a solid recovery, solid growth over the course of the year. Our economic action plan has received many compliments. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, The middle class is having trouble making ends meet. And the Conservatives at this time are allowing Canadian companies to stash billions away in tax havens with impunity. This year, Canadian companies have put $200 billion in tax shelters. And that's not normal, Mr. Speaker. Instead of eliminating jobs at the CRA, slashing their budget, will they take some action to fight to this extraterritorial use of tax shelters? Honourable Minister.
Government has zero tolerance for tax evasion. From 2006 to March 31st of 2014, the CRA audited over 8,600 international tax cases, identifying over $5.6 billion in additional taxes. And there has been no cut to auditors. In fact, we've increased the number of auditors at CRA. Our unprecedented investments have provided the CRA with enhanced tools to pursue tax evaders like never before, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, our government has introduced over 85 measures to improve the integrity of the tax system. NDP has voted against all.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, the Canadian economy actually shrank in the first quarter, yet this finance minister's only plan is to buy more ad time. An OECD report out today is downgrading Canada's growth even further and warns of serious future risks to our economy. But this minister refuses to take off the rose-colored glasses and face reality. The truth is, Canadian families are worried about how to pay the mortgage. The truth is, Canadians are worried about losing their job. And the truth is, this is the worst economic growth performance outside of a recession in 40 years. So when will the minister finally wake up and acknowledge that his plan is failing Canadians?
The honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the OECD confirmed Canada's sound fiscal situation and indicated that the economy next year will be growing by 2.3%. The fact is there was a dramatic decline in the price of oil. The U.S. economy fell by 2.7%, and all this has impacted on the Canadian economy. This is not the time for high taxes, be they a $20 billion carbon tax or a payroll tax increase through a mandatory CPP.
Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Well, you know they're getting desperate when they reach back for that old nugget. New government numbers show that top earners keep getting wealthier while working and middle-class Canadians fall further behind. And the Conservatives' income-splitting scheme will only make matters worse. Yet the minister seems confused about his own plan. Yesterday at committee he claimed that the scheme won't kick in till next year, but his own budget documents shows that he blew $2.4 billion on income splitting this year while actually running a $2 billion deficit. Wow. Now that the facts are in front of the minister, will he finally admit to the truth that he chose to run a deficit just to help wealthy Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, I said no such thing. In fact, he's confusing my answer with that of someone else, but and it was not me. Statistics Canada reported that the average net worth of Canadian families grew 73% in the last 15 years, approximately. The Economic Action Plan is working, but what the Liberals propose and what the NDP propose are reckless spending and high taxes. This is not the time for that. It never is, and we're going to continue our low-tax plan for jobs and growth, which is working and making us the envy of the world.
The honourable member for Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, supply management is good for our farmers and our consumers. It puts nutritious eggs, chicken, turkey and dairy products on our plate every day at a reasonable price. Yesterday in QP, the member of Bowles cynically said that they're only going to promote supply management and not protect it in trade talks. Then, Mr. Speaker, at Foreign Affairs Committee, the member from Edmonton Centre said it should disappear altogether. Now the Conservatives have confirmed what we always know. They want to scrap supply management. How much are they going to give away in the next trade negotiation?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't accept the premise of that question. I've made it very clear in this House many, many times that our government will continue to promote and defend the interests of our supply-managed farmers. Mr. Speaker, there's no government that has done more for Canadian farmers than this Conservative government. Our government understands that expanded trade will be a key driver of economic growth for Canada, and that's why we're participating in the TPP negotiations. We're opening up a market of 800 million consumers, a market that's worth somewhere in the order of $29 trillion a year. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we understand what's important for Canadians, and that is economic growth and long-term prosperity.
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, last week we learned that the Canadian economy shrank. This week, the CIBC and OECD have adjusted their forecast for Canada to alarming growth rates of 1.5 and 1.4%, and that's well below the Conservative government's dismal objectives. That will mean additional cuts, and they're unable to balance their budget. Are the Conservatives waiting for a recession to take some action?
Madame la Ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as I've said, Canada is not immune to financial difficulties that are affecting the global economy. Now, we know that Europe is experiencing weak growth. In the United States, the first quarter was difficult. Their economy shrank by 0.7%. But what this means is that Canada must continue with the low tax plan, and we must continue to focus on economic growth.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister's latest economic forecasts less than 2 months ago are already wrong. The country has just recorded the worst 2 months ever for trade deficits. And the OECD has slashed Canadian growth prospects for 2015 now down to a meager 1.5%, meaning 3/4 of OECD countries are doing better than Canada, and this government is likely already back in deficit once again. Before this House adjourns in 3 weeks, will the government table a new fiscal update to tell the truth about its deficit and its no-growth economy?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I'm not sure why the opposition continues to want to talk down Canada. We believe that our low-tax plan for jobs and growth will result, as it has in the past, in significant economic growth. We've created 1.2 million net new jobs. We're doing better than most developed countries, and the prospects are for solid growth this year and continuing growth next year. That's the view of all economists. That's the view of the Bank of Canada and the IMF.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. The Prime Minister started by assuring us that Mike Duffy was a resident of Prince Edward Island, but he's never been able to prove it. And then we learned that his office was directly implicated in altering a report on senators' spending. And the icing on the cake, rather, is that the Prime Minister accepted that a senator be used to fundraise for the Conservative Party on the taxpayers' dime. Will the Prime Minister finally clearly explain his role in the Senate scandal? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I've already addressed the fact of how senators are appointed. The practice has been clear on that for close to 150 years, Mr. Speaker. It's also very clear, Mr. Speaker, that it is against the rules of this House to use the resources of the taxpayers to fund partisan political offices, Mr. Speaker. That's something that the NDP did. I'm sure that taxpayers, those in the gallery and across Canada who are watching, are shocked to learn that the NDP is actually taking the taxpayer to court because it refuses to pay back the $2.7 million that it owes them. Instead, they'll be spending their summer in court, Mr. Speaker, refusing to pay it back, and I hope they'll do the right thing and pay it back.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Well, I think my honourable colleague loves kangaroo courts because the Conservatives keep getting convicted in real courts. The RCMP that tell us that the cover-up was orchestrated in the Prime Minister's office. It's the RCMP that tell us that the Prime Minister's office tried to whitewash the audit. And as more stuff come out on Mike Duffy, it's becoming clear why they were such busy little beavers. In fact, the member for Oak Ridge's Markham relied on Mike Duffy to help get him elected when he was abusing the public trust. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, when is he going to finally come clean about the orchestrated cover-up of abuse of taxpayers' money that was done in his office to benefit his party.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I campaigned in my riding, I campaigned open and honestly about the things that I wanted to accomplish for them, Mr. Speaker. I never broke my word to my constituents like that member did, Mr. Speaker. On the campaign trail, saying one thing, then coming into this House and doing the exact opposite. In fact, Mr. Speaker, he got caught and then tried to gerrymander his riding to get rid of the people that he didn't like, Mr. Speaker, so that he could try to win his seat back, Mr. Speaker. And now he's part of the crew that owes 2 points.
We need a little bit more order. Order. Order the Honourable Member for Esquamit-Wauwatosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Minister of National Defence said that our request for an apology to LGBT members of the Canadian Forces who were forced out of their jobs was new to him. That's surprising because this motion was tabled more than a year ago. And just to make sure he didn't miss it, we wrote to the Minister again this February to draw his attention to it. He had plenty of time to consider this request on behalf of hundreds of veterans. Will he now honour the service of these women and men, apologize, and correct their service records?
Again, Mr. Speaker, gay and lesbian Canadians have served openly in the Canadian Armed Forces proudly for the last more than 25 years. They do a great job, like all of our men and women in uniform. We're proud of all of them, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Defence told us that it was the first time he'd heard of any request for apologies for the discriminatory policies against LGBT members of the Canadian Forces. That despite the fact that the motion was tabled over a year ago and the NDP informed the Minister about it several times. Clearly the Minister isn't up to speed on his file. Will the Minister recognize the unacceptable policies that were in place in the Army for 25 years and apologize to LGBT members? The Honourable Minister of National Defence. As I've just said, Mr. Speaker, gay and lesbian Canadians have served openly in the Canadian Forces for over 25 years. We are proud of their service as well as the services of all Canadians in our armed forces.
The Honourable Member for York Centre.
My question is for the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. Yesterday, once again, we saw the true colour of the NDP's foreign policy when they questioned our government's support for a policy that seeks to prevent the isolation of Israel. Can the Minister please update this House on the government's position on the outcome of the recent United Nations Non-Proliferation Treaty?
The Honourable Minister of Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully accept the premise of that question. I'd like to thank the member for York Centre for his leadership on this issue. Canada remains fully committed to upholding and strengthening the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Under this Conservative government, Canada will only support a legitimate Middle East weapons of mass destruction conference process that addresses the concerns of all countries in the region, including Israel. Unlike the NDP, who pursue policies that isolate Israel in the Middle East, Canada will continue to stand, this government will continue to stand with our friend and ally for democracy, freedom, and the rule of law.
The Honourable Member for Quebec. Mr. Speaker, NDP MPs have worked tirelessly to end unfair pay-to-pay fees imposed by the banks. Yesterday, the Conservatives decided to support our motion in the House. That's great. That's a good first step. But the next step is legislation. We are ready to offer our full cooperation to see legislation passed quickly before the end of this session. Will the Minister accept our offer to finally end unfair fees from the banks? The Honourable Minister of National Finance. Mr. Speaker, the government understands the concerns of Canadians who feel that they're not getting their money's worth with banking fees. That is why we supported the motion from the opposition. We have already obtained a commitment from the banks to end fees for bills, and that is why we supported the opposition's motion. That's the kind of measure that we will include in our mandatory consumer protection code that we promised to put in place in the Economic Action Plan.
Well, the only thing standing between now and the end of unfair pay-to-pay fees are these conservatives right here, Mr. Speaker. So, while I appreciate their support for the motion, let's be clear. If the government's serious about standing up for hard-working people, will the minister pass legislation before the summer that stops banks from picking the pockets of Canadians with these unfair fees?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I've already said, we have obtained a voluntary agreement from the banks not to impose pay-to-pay fees. I'm not sure whether the opposition is listening. It is also the kind of issue we may include in the mandatory consumer protection framework. We've also introduced tough measures to protect Canadians, including implementing low-cost banking accounts and free banking services for over 7 million Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Well, I'm not sure where that agreement came from with the banks. Was this some kind of nudge, wink deal? We don't know. We haven't seen it. We want a mandatory code. That's what this government agreed to yesterday. We want to see it happen, Mr. Speaker. Now on to another issue. The government has supported adoptions for many Muslim countries. Nusrat Munshi has been working for 2 years to bring her child home with no success. Other countries like the United States and the United Kingdom have figured this out and allowed legal recognition of guardianships for children from Muslim countries. Why hasn't this government, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite does well to not spread disinformation. Adoptions continue to happen to Canada in large numbers, including from many Muslim-majority countries, Mr. Speaker. But those adoptions have to respect the national law of those countries, international conventions on adoption and the law of children, and Canadian law, Mr. Speaker. When any of those requirements is not met, the adoption will not take place.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. The Minister wants us to believe that he can't do anything else in this file, and that's shameful, because this situation could be fixed, and it should be fixed. If the minister doesn't know how to do it, well, he can look at what's happening in the United States or the United Kingdom, because they have fixed this problem. Since 2013, this government no longer recognizes adoptions from Pakistan. That means parents are separated from their children for months or even years. So will the minister show leadership on this file, fix this situation, and allow adoptive parents to live in Canada with their children? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. 2 NDP members, Mr. Speaker, who, instead of looking out for the interests of real people, real anxious families, prefer to speak about it in the House instead of coming to speak to us about specific files. And they know very well, Mr. Speaker, that we can't comment on specific individual cases in this House. They also know very well what the rules are when it comes to adoption. They can come and talk to us if they have specific files they want to move forward on, Mr. Speaker, and that they shouldn't bring other people's family lives into partisan politics.
Mr. Speaker, the OECD has cut its 2015 GDP forecast for Canada to a dismal 1.5%. By way of excuse, the minister today claimed, and I quote, "We are doing better than most developed countries." Well, that is simply not true. The OECD puts us behind Australia, Germany, Ireland, Israel, the Netherlands, South Korea, Sweden, the UK, the US, and yes, even Spain. This is no global problem, as the government likes to pretend to excuse its shoddy management. This is a made-in-Canada runway to recession. When will the finance...
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
If I understand the member opposite correctly, she seems to think that Canada is an island and that we are not in any way affected, even though we're a great trading nation, we're in no way affected by what's going on in the rest of the world. That may be the liberal view, but we live in a global world, and of course we're affected by it. Our government is focused on what matters to Canadians: jobs and economic growth. Our plan is training, trade, and low taxes. We've created 1.2 million net new jobs. According to the International Labour Organization Global Wage Report, Canada has the second best pay gain.
The honourable member for Kings Hands.
Speaker, the Canadian economy shrank last quarter. We're halfway to a recession. TD, BMO, CIBC, and the OECD have all downgraded their projections for Canada. TD is saying that while the headline growth number was bad, the underlying details were worse. Yet yesterday, the finance minister, ignoring mounting evidence, predicted growth this quarter. Why won't he tell Canadians the truth? That the economy has flatlined and we are teetering on recession. Why is he refusing to provide a real plan for jobs and growth? Does he think wishful thinking is a replacement for a plan?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals and the NDP it's really rich for them to be accusing our job creation record. They voted against every job creation measure our government put forward, including freezing EI rates, tax cuts for manufacturers, $75 billion in stable and predictable job-creating infrastructure, the LNG, accelerated capital cost allowance. The Liberals would introduce increase taxes through payroll taxes, an increase in mandatory CPP. His leader thinks that budget.
The honourable member for Burnaby Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say thousands of Canada's top social scientists are in Ottawa today sharing their latest innovations in their field. They conduct exceptional research on the defining social and economic issues of our time. Social science research is critical to understanding our society and growing our economy. But of course, the Conservatives don't share this view. Since 2007, base funding for the three research granting councils has been slashed by millions, not to mention killing off the long-form census, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Why are Conservatives undercutting Canadian social scientists with their reckless cuts to research?
Why?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I absolutely have to say to that member that what he's just said, that's just not true. We have made record, Mr. Speaker, we've made record investments in science, technology, and innovation. And if they would listen for just a moment, Mr. Speaker, we have made massive, significant legacy funding in 2014 Economic Action Plan and 2015 Economic Action Plan. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to support for scientists and innovation, this government stands tall and stands proud.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. The Minister of State is the one misleading us. The current government doesn't sufficiently support humanities and social sciences, and the numbers prove it. Between 2017 and 2015, cuts to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council have reached almost $50 million, and a Conservative operative even said in 2013 that there were too many young people in universities and not enough young welders. When will the government stop denigrating social sciences and humanities researchers and recognize their contributions? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, we have made unprecedented investments in science.
Member from Burnaby Douglas and the member who just spoke talked about social sciences. We're very proud, for example, of the appointments that we've just made to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Julia Foster, the new chair, Tracy Somerville from our home province of British Columbia, a brilliant academic from Prince George, who's going to do fantastic work there for all Canadians in the advancement of science and the advancement of discovery for all Canadians.
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to read that in my province of Saskatchewan, police know it's their job to enforce the law and shut down marijuana storefronts operating in our cities. Right. Can the Minister of Health please update the House on the serious health risks of smoking marijuana?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for his question. Of course, the report from the Health Committee that outlined expert testimony makes it clear that when you smoke marijuana, there's an increased risk of mental health issues, including psychosis and schizophrenia. Mr. Speaker, unlike the Liberal leader who wants to normalize the smoking of pot by legalizing it, making it available in storefronts just like alcohol and cigarettes, this Conservative government will make sure that that storefronts selling marijuana remain illegal. We expect, Mr. Speaker, all police to enforce the law.
The honourable member for Mount
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will be the sad anniversary of the tragic shooting in Moncton in which 3 RCMP officers were killed in the line of duty. The report on that tragedy made many of the same recommendations found in the report on the Mayerthorpe shooting, where 4 officers died 8.5 years earlier. And now the RCMP faces charges under the Canada Labour Code for inadequate training and equipment. Ultimately, responsibility rests with the Minister of Public Safety. Why has this minister failed the RCMP in their funding needs? Why is the government not providing enough money to the RCMP for training and equipment so they can protect themselves?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's rather unfortunate that the member has posed that question on the eve of tomorrow, which is a day that we should be honouring the 3 fallen RCMP members who lost their lives in the line of duty. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, our government, our Conservative government, has full confidence in the RCMP to enforce the laws of Canada and keep all Canadians safe. The RCMP commissioned a report into this incident and is acting upon those recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tibetans in my community are worried about their loved ones following the devastating earthquake in Nepal. They're concerned that their families, even those who qualify for expedited family reunification, might not get to Canada because as refugees, many don't have the necessary travel documents. Tibetan refugees in Nepal are facing exceptional and urgent circumstances. So what will the minister do to cut through the red tape and help reunite these families?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we continue to be very concerned about the situation in Nepal, about reuniting families affected by the disaster there, and about Tibetan populations facing hardship at home, in Nepal, and in India. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we have, thanks to an initiative of my predecessor, committed ourselves to the largest resettlement program of Tibetan refugees in Canadian history, and I was pleased to organize a information session in that member's riding to help resolve these issues of documentation very recently.
The honourable member for Whitby, Oshawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ford, Chrysler, and General have written to Premier Kathleen Wynne warning that her plan to expand mandatory pension contributions will kill jobs and increase the cost of doing business. Could the Minister of Employment please update this House on our government's plan to support job growth in the auto industry?
Honourable Minister of Employment.
Yes, I thank that member for her hard work on behalf of auto workers, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to report that according to Desrosiers Automotive Consultants, and I quote, the Canadian new vehicle market remains to be on track for the best-selling year ever. Our low-tax plan is working. However, the Liberals are planning a new tax that will throw auto workers out of a job. And I quote from the Windsor Star, the local Chamber of Commerce and auto sector companies are warning Premier Kathleen Wynne a new provincial plan could lead to layoffs or cutbacks in Windsor's fragile auto sector. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal leader has endorsed that proposed payroll tax of $1,000 for every worker. Mr. Speaker, we'll fight to stop it.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although the House unanimously passed my motion on non-designated airports on April 29th, the government has remained passive and silent on this file. This motion said that as soon as possible, a mechanism should be implemented to allow for security screening at non-designated airports like the one in Sherbrooke. The people of Sherbrooke have a right to have an airport that helps economic vitality in our region. And we're waiting for answers from the Minister of Transport. How is it that 5 weeks after my motion was passed, nothing has been announced? What is the Minister of Transport waiting for?
Minister
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've been working on this issue far longer than the member put forth his motion in the House of Commons. And in fact, that's why we're so far along in the curve in having these discussions on a one-to-one basis with airports that are interested in taking the opportunity to have a pilot project with respect to being able to pay for CATSA services. Mr. Speaker, we'll update the airports as we move along, but this is really for the matter for Transport Canada officials to discuss with the local area and not a matter for political interference.
Let's get it right.
The Honourable Member for Bar-Richelieu, Nicolas Bécancourt. Mr. Speaker, once again the federal government is acting alone without worrying about the repercussions on Quebec. This time, Ottawa is interfering in relations between France and Quebec. Brutally and without any regard for the formal requests from Quebec ministers Vail and Saint-Pierre, and without any regard for international agreements between Quebec and its partners. The federal government changed visa rules for foreign interns. This brutal change from Ottawa means 300 French students won't be able to do an internship in Quebec this year. That's Ottawa knows best, apparently. Is this the government's new policy on cooperation, rejecting out-of-hand formal requests from Quebec ministers, even Federalist ministers? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. Mr. Speaker, we find it odd that the member from across the way doesn't feel that it's necessary to ensure that Canadians and Quebecers have the priority in the labour market. That was the goal of our reform to the temporary foreign worker program, and that is why we have new measures to ensure the integrity of that new program, and we will continue to target reciprocity in our exchange programs with France, and we will ensure that Canadian and Quebec workers have priority.
Question period for today. I would like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of His Eminence Cardinal Raymond Burke, Cardinal Patron of the Sovereign Order of Malta. Tabling of documents. I have one. I have the honor to lay upon the table the annual reports on the access to information and the privacy acts of the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages for the year 2014-2015.
These reports are deemed to have been sent to the Committee of Justice.
Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36.8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 128 petitions.
Introduction of government bills. Ms. Raitt, seconded by Ms. Ambrose, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicle Safety Act and to make a consequential amendment to another act. This motion is deemed adopted. Madame Raitt,
Ms. Raitt, seconded by Ms. Ambrose, move that this bill be now read a first time and printed. This motion is deemed to be adopted.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 41, I have the honour to present in both official language the report of the Canadian